Good morning, Mr. Smith in class. Today I will be talking to you about the selling of the slaves in the Americas. Enjoy. When did it start? It all began in America when the first African slaves were brought to the North American colony of Jamestown, Virginia in the 1619s to aid in the production of crops such as tobacco. Millions of slaves were brought to America from Africa to be sold as if they would become someone's property. And worst part, most of the slaves were stolen from their own people, African people, young men, which would be trading the slaves for gunpowder, guns, and worse weapons. Their so-called home for the journey was a tiny space not even bigger than a bathtub. They had to live in that for a year. The day of the selling, they would have to wash them in pig fat to make them more appealing to the audience/buyers. They do that because the slaves left were the healthiest but yet in very poor conditions due to the lack of food. They did change the way they treated the slaves, upgrading the dormitory and putting more food in stock. 95% of the slaves were young adults, children, teenagers, and were pulled out of their family. The journey was tough. Most of the slaves died due to the lack of food and nutrients. Some were killed because of the diseases. Others were killed by the ship crew due to the fact they noticed some of them would not make it due to the lack of food and illness. How did slaves get to America? Most American slaves did come from Africa. The majority of slaves who were brought to North America came from Africa. They were captured and sold to slave traders. They were forced onto ships in long journeys to America. This journey was often called the Middle Passage. Once they reached this country, men, women, and children were sold. Slaves were often sold in auctions held right on a public street. People interested in buying these men, women, and children would come and look at them, often poke them around, and generally figure out how much work they could do. Men who could do the heavy work were sold for the most money. These auctions were terrible times for the slaves. Often they were the last time they would ever see their families again. How were the slaves treated in their time at home? After they would be bought, it was going to be the roughest 30 to 60 years of their lives. They were beaten more severely than what would happen in their journey by sea. Most women or teenage girls were sexually abused by the male in the house or used for a sex distraction. Most young girls would have babies and would be pregnant and would not have the time and money for the child and would have to give it up for adoption. Or they would have run away and go live on a street to ask for money to keep the child. The end. I hope you all enjoyed and helps you understand a little more about the selling of the slaves in the Americas.